Good morning. This is Commissioner Rawlinson. I'm calling our meeting, special call meeting of the commission to order this morning. Commissioner Blackwood, would you read the notice of the meeting?
Yes. A meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the June 30th, 2021 Emergency Commission meeting was distributed June 28th, 2021 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Very good. All right, Constance, can one of y'all have the agenda in front of you, and can you tell me what's next on the agenda?
The next is the adoption of the agenda, number 3.
Okay, can you kind of go through that agenda, what the order is, so that I'll know, if you don't mind?
After the adoption of the agenda, the number 4 item is 10% federal medical assistance percentages, which is the FMAP funding discussion. And then the 5th item is the adjournment.
Okay, very good. All right, I need a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? Do we have discussion, Barry?
No, I have no discussion about that.
Okay. All right. We're going to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. The agenda is set. The first item of business is the FMAP, 40% FMAP money. Pat, would you like to lead us off?
Sure, I'm glad to. In preparation for today's meeting, we prepared a 3-page memo kind of setting out the background of 10% FMAP, our methodology for collecting it, and then some discussion about some of the strategies of how to use it. And then ultimately, we committed to a 10% FMAP budget plan. And the purpose of the plan is to really give feedback to the people that gave us their time during the listening sessions, that this is what we heard, this is the process, and obviously not everybody's going to see it the exact same way. There was numerous deliberations among staff and commissioners to grind this to a consensus. And ultimately, whatever we approve today, we will send over to the Department of Health and Human Services, and they will use it and put it with their information, because they also have HCBS services, so they'll be getting 10% FMAP money themselves, and they will make a final state submission to CMS before July 12th deadline. That gives you an overview, and if you need to point me to be more specific in an area, feel free to do so.
Commissioners, do we have any proposals as far as that's concerned? Pat, do you have a proposal that you'd like to read?
Do I have any proposals?
Yes, as far as what we should vote on.
Yeah, I have 2 proposals that we're requesting a vote on today.
Stephanie,
This
is David. Could I interject something just real fast to make sure everybody's clear? This is David Thomas. We have held numerous meetings around the state, and I want to make sure that everyone under. Can y'all hear me? Okay.
We lost you there for a second, David.
I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
All right. I just want to make sure it's clear that commissioners and staff went around the state getting input from all kinds of groups and individuals, and so the ideas went into a pool that staff has kind of condensed and come with now their recommendations. So this had to do with a large amount of information gathering that took place over the past, I guess, 2.5 weeks. That's all.
That is correct.
Excuse me, Pat, go ahead.
But
Okay.
let me say that
I'll pick up where Senator Thomas left off. Is part of the process was to estimate what the 10% FMAP benefit would be to DDSN, and based on our analysis, we will generate a conservative estimate of $42.5 million for a 1-year period starting April 1st of this year through March 31st of next year. And with that $42 million, $0.5 million estimated revenue that we're going to get, we've been asked to come up with a budget. We did the collection, as Senator Thomas mentioned, and now we're in the synthesizing phase to get down to a budget proposal. And so what I have is the memo and an attachment to the memo, and the attachment to the memo lays out 11 areas that we would like to propose to fund that would combine to $42.5 million. And the list for people participating on the meeting today, I would ask Ken to put it up on the screen, if that's okay with the chairman.
Yes, please.
And that'll give us something to talk about and discuss. And I'll just give you, as kind of the facilitator of this process, we converted the general needs of the 7 listening sessions. We looked at our own internal analysis. We have met with the providers and provider associations on numerous times, both formally and informally. I think everybody has had a huge bite at the apple to get their input into the final product. And when we build this product today, and we are proposing it, and before I propose the draft, the budget we have, the other proposal we're having, which I think I'll cover first because it's probably very important to how we move forward, is I will be proposing that we establish a 10% FMAP steering committee. And I did not prescribe how we should staff it, but certainly we should staff it with a group such as family providers, stakeholders, commissioners, so that as we go through this 3-year process, and we are committing $42.5 million to 11 areas, that's a very high level commitment. It's a high level budget. And when we start getting into the detailed tactical planning to make this happen, I feel certain that we're going to run into issues and roadblocks, and estimations may be higher or low. So there's going to be adjustment to this $42.5 million during the arc of this 3-year process. And I think we need to have all the stakeholders in the committee so that when they do make adjustments, people have trust and confidence that the adjustments are being made in the best interest of the system. And the only way to do that is have all stakeholders at the table. And I will also caveat that a driver in our plan is we're coming at a fortuitous time where we're having an IDRD waiver renewal, which will take place in 6 months. And that's just a natural time every 5 years where we look at our services, we look at the rates, everything gets refreshed. And DDSN in conjunction with HHS felt like this was a time to go bold with the IDRD renewal. It is still being refined today. So we don't even have a final proposal of what's going to be in it, but we do know there's many services at play that are going to be enhanced, such as day programs, such as individual residential settings. There's a list of them that are on the chart. But what ultimately gets produced in August may differ a little bit. So the point is, we can budget $20 million for increased costs coming from the IDRD waiver over a 3-year period. That may go up or down depending on what the final waiver looks like. And so with that said, having that steering committee gives us the flexibility to adjust after we start executing, so that when we look at this number today and people look at these numbers, these are not static numbers that are just, we're never going to move a penny from. These are initial budget projections that will be modified as needed over time. So that's my first proposal. And my second proposal will be to adopt attachment A. If you want me to go over each one, I'd be glad to for the record, or if you feel like what's on the board is sufficient, that's fine as well.
Mr. I would prefer that you go over them individually so that we have it on the record.
Okay?
And can I make a motion, Chairman
Yes,
Lawson,
hold a moment
to
then.
have you appoint those individuals to the steering committee next month with commission approval?
Me or?
Yeah,
Who
you.
do you want the chair to appoint? Okay, so there's a motion on the floor for the
Yeah.
chairman to appoint the commission with, to appoint this oversight committee or steering committee, with the approval of the commission at the next commission meeting.
Yeah.
Do I have a
Question.
second on that?
Question.
Is someone asking a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Miller. Question.
Yes, Commissioner Miller.
Okay, how many commissioners, was that decided? Or that's going to be leave up
Robin,
to
is that
you?
in your motion?
No, that's not in my motion, but I'm, you know, if we want to make a motion that maybe at least amend the motion to say at least 2 commissioners are on the steering committee, and
Okay.
it's, you know, it's a representation of the community and stakeholders as well. Yeah, maybe a
Okay, so like
private provider as well as a DDSN provider. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is that suitable, Mr. Commissioner Miller?
I'm fine with that.
She's amending her motion to add that there will be 2 commissioners, a stakeholder, a family member, and DDSN staffer on that commission. So there would be a committee of 5.
I think a private provider needs to be part of the steering committee as well as the DDSN board. Yeah, someone from, yeah.
So
and then
6 is what we would need.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't need,
I'm sorry.
you have 2 commissioners, you have, 1 private provider representative, 1 parent representative, and 1,
DDSN board.
yes, provider representative, which is of course, not public providers, but,
One of our executive directors or something. But don't we need to add a staff member to that? Isn't that correct?
they don't need to be a voting member. No, we're not, this committee is a voting member. So
Okay.
just be a part of it.
Okay, that's fine.
You can vote.
All right, so Robin, will you please restate your motion?
My motion is to have you, as the chair of the commission, appoint the following individuals before the next month's commission meeting so that we can approve as a commission the group that you have pulled together. And so that group, we would like to include 2 commissioners, a parent family member, a private DDSN provider, and a executive director or a provider within the DDSN network. That's my motion.
Okay, is there a second on that motion?
Before the second, I just want to make sure, this is Commissioner Miller, I just want to make sure that the 2 commissioners, the chair is a given, am I correct? That's
No.
have nothing to do with the 2 commissioners.
That's correct. It'll be 2 commissioners. I serve on any committee I appoint.
Absolutely. Just want to make it clear for the record.
Okay, any other questions regarding the motion? Do I have a second? Okay, who is that? Gary? Okay, Kohler. All right. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
I have a question with regard to exactly what powers we're assigning to this committee. I mean, we have it that they're taking votes. I mean, that was discussed. What exactly are they taking votes on? What's their power? Exactly what are they what are they, it's very indistinct exactly what their function is going to be to me at this point in time, in terms of the extent that we're going to designate power to them to determine where these funds are going and to what extent they're coming back to the commission. If it's just making recommendations to the commission can take or abandon, not a lot of functionality there. So I'm a little bit concerned about the lack of definition of what exactly we're asking the steering committee to do. I think that oversight is necessary and important, but I'm concerned about the lack of definition here.
I agree. Okay, does anyone want to comment further on that?
Well, as I understand it, the definition would be that we would put, today we're gonna vote to put this money into these different parameters, and as that money needed not moved necessarily from parameter to parameter, but as it needed to be evaluated as to how that money would be spent within that parameter, then this committee would do that. And have the authority to for just this particular FMAP plan, this 42,000.
So essentially what we're saying is this committee has the power to then override the proposed budget that we have, or the plan that we have in front of us. I'm a bit concerned again by that functionality of we're abrogating our obligation to track this money as a commission. I certainly had no problem with them making recommendations. And again, I'm not disputing that there needs to be a direct oversight function. I'm just, if we're saying they control the funds, that concerns me.
I agree, Commissioner Mel.
Commissioner Robinson, this is Constance. We're getting a lot of feedback. So if you're not speaking, if you could mute your mics or mute your phones, and only the folks who are currently speaking will be unmuted.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Mel, I have the same concerns. I don't know that they should have control over this money. I think after it, or just before it's being spent, they need to make sure that it's being spent as we designate it. I don't think they need to have authority over that money. I think they should be a watchdog type committee that looks at the expenses to make sure that it's staying on track. Is that more? That's more what I thought it was for. I wasn't planning on giving them authority to control the money or override anything that we did.
Yeah, neither was I.
We'll make recommendations.
Why don't we? Can we have an amendment maybe on that motion, Robin?
To the chair, can we get an input from Pat Millie?
Yes.
And the director?
I agree.
Just so that we're clear, the recommendation that we have is the commission appoint a 10% FMAP steering committee. And what I heard further defined was that the membership would be composed of approximately 6 individuals that were discussed. I think latitude should be provided there, but certainly the local steering committee should be oversight, information collection. Any recommendations of changing the budget should be recommended to the full commission, and they should be advised on that one.
As long as that's clear, then I'm fine. But that was not clear, as was indicated by the differing statements that we just got.
That's right. How about Constance? Do you want to add anything to that legally?
No, I think Pat summarized it well. The purpose of the steering committee is to be oversight and to make recommendations to the full commission. We weren't proposing the steering committee to make changes to something the commission has approved as a whole.
Okay. Commissioner Blackwood, do you want to make an amendment to the motion?
Yeah, I can make an amendment that says this steering committee will only provide oversight and recommendations to the full commission regarding expenditures or changes to, budget, as time goes on in terms of, when costs are realized and understood, after we do the research and, find out, after staff does the final, cost for things. That's my amendment. That is simply oversight and recommendations to the commission to approve or decline.
Am I clear though that, or not, Robin, that the parameters that we've set today, the buckets of money, if you will remain the same in the same area?
Barry, you got to hold a minute. We don't have a second on the motion to discuss it yet. Do I have a second on the motion?
Second.
Okay, now we can discuss, Barry. Sorry.
What I'm saying is, it needs to say, or am I clear that it should say that the buckets of money, if you will, the 11 different parameters we have here, money would remain in those parameters because that's in those parameters, meaning that we leave $1 million under number 1 option, leave $7 million under number 2, and on it goes. If we don't leave that, if we need to say this oversight committee has to leave that in those provisions, so there's really no reason to vote today, because they can just move it around however they want. Part of the point was the COVID relief should only, for example, and I'm just using the example, the COVID relief under number 1 should only be $1 million. It should not go up to $3 or $4 or $5 million in and money that grants form. It should be, there should be parameters to spend. That's why that says $1 million on number 1, for example. And it says $3.4 million for day services, and on it goes. So those sections need to remain the same with this committee.
Commissioner Robinson, I think you're speaking, but you're muted.
I'm sorry, I forget. I apologize. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none. I'm sorry.
Are we amending the motion to what I just said, or are we not?
Well,
No.
I think Robin had
We're not
already
amending.
amended it. Right now, there's a motion and amendment on the floor.
Could I impose and have somebody read the amendment?
Yes. Could we have possibly Christie read that back, or Constance read it back, whoever has it right there?
So,
Did you come up?
yeah.
You come here. What this is?
If I was trying to take the notes just to make sure I had it too. So what I had was, the role of the steering committee is oversight, information collection, and to provide recommendations to change the budget should be given to the full commission for approval. That's right.
I think that's it in a summary.
Yes.
That's clear.
Are there any other changes to the motion or the motion as it reads?
So just so we're clear, this committee can move this money however they want to within these parameters. Is that what we're saying?
That is,
No.
that is
No.
how I-
No.
Huh? So
Pat, can you speak to the flexibility that we will have if that you had shared with me a few times regarding, the money in the buckets that we're approving today,
Yes.
and what they may look like in a year from now in terms of
Okay,
expending that money.
the purpose of our budget is CMS asked the state Medicaid agency to provide a budget for how they would use a 10% FMAP. So we're doing our part, they're doing their part, we're giving it to them, they're gonna combine it, send it to CMS, hopefully CMS will approve it or whatever feedback they get. When we get a final budget, we have just elected in the starting gate to establish 11 objectives, and we've allocated an estimation, I wanna add that, estimation of funding. So when it comes, so if we have an approved budget lined up that way, now we have to execute it. So I think the role of the steering committee is to provide oversight over the execution of the budget, so that they have input, they understand what's going on, there's some collaboration, but at the end of the day, as we are executing this budget, and I think the state director is going to execute this budget because that's how things get done. But the oversight committee makes sure that the transparency of what we're doing and how we are doing it is being monitored, input is being given, and that inherently over the 3-year arc, there will be budget allocation judgments made between programs. We might even start a new option if something pops up. That's where the committee would come in, and the steering committee, and make recommendations to the full commission on adjustments to the budget, as well as providing oversight so that all our stakeholders have confidence that the details of what we're doing are being considered in a number of ways. For example, we are going to develop a training program. Okay, we're not even into the training program. Do we outsource 100% of it? Do we do some of it in-house? There's a whole arc of options of how to execute that. And once we get the budget, the state director will develop plans to execute that budget, and we have to have oversight of how we're doing it. And there is certain decision points in the normal execution of a budget that we want input on, but at the end of the day, the state director is going to execute that budget and be accountable for the execution of that budget. But we want our stakeholders to watch what we're doing so they have confidence that we're just not, like in the past, lack of information causes distrust. We're not distrustful, but the lack of information causes distrust. So having them there creates the oversight, the transparency, and I think they should be the recommending entity to the commission on any changes to the budget. So that's what I see their role to be. And as far as the composition, I would not lock in whether you want to have 5, 6, or 7. I don't think we should be prescriptive. I don't think you should feel like you have to decide today. I just think, hey, it's a good idea, probably 2 commissioners. And I like the idea of adding a private provider and a board provider. I like that idea. So I think however you want to build that oversight committee is within discretion of the chairman to make those final decisions, not necessarily today. But I do believe the concept of having it is important because there's a lot of money and it's going to improve the system. And when you're making trade-offs, people will maybe not quite understand why the trade-offs are made, and this helps communicate to everybody what we're doing.
But to answer Commissioner Malthus's question directly, no, the steering committee will not be able to change the budget plan that was approved by the full commission.
Absolutely not.
Okay, commissioners, I'm reminding you to please, if you are not speaking, to put yourself on mute. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'm ready. We're going to proceed with the vote. All in favor with the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none, the ayes carry, and the oversight committee will be set up by next month. All right, let's move on.
Okay. Before I cover attachment A, I want to take 2 minutes to provide the context of some things that are going on outside of this FMAP, 10% FMAP decision, because what's happening outside affects some of the decisions we made. For example, the General Assembly had just approved DDSN's fiscal year 22 budget, which starts tomorrow. They approved a $10 million increase for residential habilitation daily rate, which will be a 3.4% increase. The General Assembly approved $7.2 million for an increase in respite, which will be effective tomorrow. We will be increasing the family arranged respite caregivers mandatory hourly rate upwards from its $11.30. It will be upwards. We have not decided on the exact amount. And then secondly, we'll be developing a business respite rate, a second respite rate, so that businesses can be, we can increase the presence of businesses in serving respite, which is very low today because the rate's low. And if we increase the rate, service providers increase, now local communities will have respite businesses to go to and bring their caregiver to speed up caregiver certification as well as access. The General Assembly just approved a 2.5% salary increase for DDSN's provider network, as precisely defined as boards, day and residential case managers, and early interventionists. And that's the general group that's going to get that raise. And lastly, one thing that will not be in the attachment A is funding any residential rate increases. And the reason why we're not doing that is because as we work with HHS to get enhanced residential service descriptions and individual rates into the waiver, we don't know what that number is, and it could be a larger number. And what we want to be able to tell everybody is it's not in the 10% FMAP budget plan because DDSN has ample reserves to fund most anything that comes out of a residential increase. So that's why it's not in there, because we have our own separate funds to take care of those issues. So now I'll go to attachment A, and it's on the screen, and I'll just paraphrase it, being as factual as I can. I might throw a little bit of context in there to help the people listening. Option 1 is a one-time COVID-19 gap funding grant to our provider network. Option 2 is targeted staff retention and recruiting in the form of enhanced pay rates, bonus pay, incentive pay, and hiring bonuses. The reason I bring those two together is at the listening session, the provider network was one of the most common themes was their inability to attract new employees because of the labor shortage, because of the rates. And so when we took that plus their general needs, the final decision was to err on the side of taking our funds to be more targeted toward employee retention and incentivize new employees, and lesser on grants that have less accountability. We heard the provider network, but we felt like it was better to be a little bit more targeted toward employee retention and incentivizing new employees as opposed to general gap funding. So there was some debate about the amount of money between those two buckets. The total didn't change, but we erred on $1 million for the one-time gap funding and $7 million for targeted staff retention. Item number 3 is one of our bold moves. It's $3.45 million for the next 6 months for the day program. And what we're going to do is add $7 a unit. The current unit is $31.29. We're going to raise it to $38.29, and we're just going to pay $7 of state funds per unit for the next 6 months to incentivize and help providers get back to full attendance. We're hovering around 50% return to day programs from our at-home community. And that's for a number of reasons. Some providers are at 70 or 80%, some are at 10%. And there's labor shortages, there's many reasons out there. What we want to do is we want to incentivize them to get back into it because families in counties without day programs are still stuck. And we really want to give them every opportunity to succeed. And that's why we're really putting that amount of money into it. And that would average about $575,000 a month and $3.45 million for the 6-month period. Number 4 is our biggest focus. 20 million of the 42.5 million will be dedicated and reserved for the state fund match for the IDRD waiver renewal that's going to go in effect on or about July 1st of 22, 6 months from now. And that will go back to the strategy with HHS to go bold with the renewal, to enhance current services and add a service or two. And the big one there, the two big ones obviously are moving the day program to be more community-based by lowering the ratios from the current description of 1 to 7 to down to 1 to 4, 1 to 5, depending on how the service descriptions get through the HHS review process. And that in turn would increase rates, but it also would increase the requirements to serve better quality day program services in the community. But obviously the individual settings in the waiver is critical, and they will get individual rates. Number 5 is $2.5 million for a telehealth telehealth for the residential community for 1 year. That would include startup equipment costs, as well as the subscription payment for all residential individuals for 1 year. Number 6 is $990,000 of state funds, and we'll be adding 50 waiver slots to the community supports, IDRD, and HASCI waiver slots for a total of 150. And I will caveat that this is not recurring funds. This is temporary funding to fund slots for however long it takes until we can get recurring legislative appropriations. And so that's and that will be federally matched at $2.3 million. Number 7 is $1 million for grants for generators for residential and day facilities based on need. That will be a competitive process where we'll solicit grant requests, and we'll prioritize the need and use those for generators. Number 8 is $2 million, and that is for a major training effort. That will be matched at the 50% level from the administrative contract, as it pays, as long as it pertains to the waiver services. And we're not going to tell you exactly what the information that we got from the listening sessions. We came up with 6 levels of training targets. They're out on the list. I won't go through them just for brevity, but it is available after this meeting. Once this is approved, we'll put it out to the community so they can see it themselves. But the whole theory is we need to have a comprehensive training program that works for all levels and for all types of providers. And so we're committing that amount of money plus match money to move that initiative forward. Number 9 is $1,050,000 to build capacity in our system to prevent escalation of individuals in more restrictive and more costly living settings by developing telepsychiatry response capability. The General Assembly was very generous to us 2 years ago, and they provided us about $500,000 in state funds, and we set up a facility at Midlands for crisis response for residential stabilization. Of course, it was to be completed the week after COVID hit, so we did not do that during the pandemic, but that's going to come back online. And this capability is to bring telepsychiatry to the forefront. We've talked about it for years, and if you need to speak more about it, we're just going to speak eloquently about many of the people that are in crisis have many psychiatric medicine stabilization requirements, and finding that type of position for our population is very, very difficult. And Rufus developed a relationship with Department of Health, and I believe we'll be able to piggyback on their system to some extent to get that going quickly. $2,005,000 for case management. These will be grants to case management to support mobile workforce, increasingly relying on virtual technology to include being HIPAA compliance. Our case management network is undergoing change. Due to conflict with case management, boards are getting out of the business, other providers are taking the business, and they're stretching their parameters, and they're really moving toward a more virtual mobile workforce. And I think this will help them support their efforts in this area. And we'll come out with exact procedures of how we're going to spend this money. I know in the last year, a lot of money was spent. We may go back a little bit, but I think that will support that entire service in a significant manner. And then the last one, number 11, is $1,505,000. And that is for grants to residential providers to pilot technology in staff. Staffing is right now is in a crisis. It may normalize in 6 months. It may be a temporary phase. I would suggest that in our industry, the forecast is for greater and greater difficulty in finding direct support staff due to the demographics, as well as people like myself, the baby boomers that are heading into retirement, and that we're going to be competing for those same workers. And so I think we have to start getting smart about how do we use technology to support our individuals. And I'd rather do it now while we're not in a crisis. And I think it was a really good idea to have those grants. We may not use all those grants, that money may be reallocated, but we want to make sure that we started out of the starting gate with sufficient funds to people to explore technology options in lieu of staff. And that totals $42.5 million. 1, 2, 3, 4 of these will benefit from Medicaid match, will total $53 million. And the last point I will say is it's been in the system for 3 or 4 years. The need for residential rate increases. None of this money is dedicated for it. We're in the process of working through the IDRD waiver renewal. We're going to try to get in the renewal, and whatever rates HHS comes up with, if they do end up on a positive needing state funds to match, we're in a very fortunate position to have large carry forward reserves to meet those needs outside of the 10% cap. And that's all I have.
Chairman or Chairwoman, Stephanie David Thomas, may I ask a question?
Sure, Commissioner Thomas, please go ahead.
It is an issue that is dear to my heart and has to do with setting, as Barry said a little while ago, making sure parameters are set that can be checked and validated. And I'm assuming that probably some of the things the steering committee will do in sync with what Pat has delineated is a system whereby the staff somehow can go back and make sure that everything that is done, such for instance as the day program, what specifics are in place. And Pat and I have discussed some of the things that the staff would look for later on. But I just as emphatically as I can say it, what you don't inspect, don't expect. What you don't inspect, you cannot expect. And if we don't set very clear parameters on this money, it will just eviscerate to some degree. Not that people are doing something wrong, but if you don't explain precisely what the money must be used for, and then have a system in place and they know it, where you're going to go back and check and hold everybody accountable for every dime of that money, then it will be kind of lost and found thing. I mean, the money will simply not be used as we're anticipating, and that the public would anticipate. So I throw that out as an expectation that I'm expecting the commission and the steering committee to fully see how staff is going to lay out the conditions for this money and how it should be spent, and then in some form or fashion a way to check and make sure. There was a commission that I sat on for some time, and we had a grant system, and then when we assumed the grants were being spent as we had conditioned, but then we decided to go back and actually check and see, and we found out to our surprise that a lot of that grant money was not being spent, some of it in any form or fashion like we had told them they were supposed to spend it, and just assumed it was being done. So this is a huge amount of money. It's subject at some point to match, and so there's a lot of money involved here, and we as a commission need to make sure that we never hear an idea that floats around that, wow, that was just basically found money, some idea like that, and they spent money, or it was spent in ways that we would say, That's not what we intended. I mean, how did that happen? So I throw this out as a kind of an accounting assurance procedure, but in front of the accounting is making sure that we set up these various programs or expenditures or bids that go out or whatever they are, that they are delineated very carefully and that there's a lot of good oversight there.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Is there any other discussion? All right. Is there a motion on the floor?
I move that we accept the general proposal has been put forward by Pat concerning the I guess bucket expenditure.
Second.
Question?
Yeah, okay, now we're ready for discussion. Go ahead.
We need to just add into that, Commissioner Thomas, what you just stated so that we have a reporting system in place and utilizing our auditors here at DDSN.
I'm happy to amend my motion to include Commissioner Miller's addendum.
Okay, Commissioner LaMelle, are you seconding that as well?
Yes.
Okay. All right, is there any further discussion on this matter?
Discussion on option 1, please. All these funds are arbitrary to a degree, except number 1, the one-time COVID-19 reimbursement plan is the way I see it. And I personally think that $1 million is way too low because people spent money and staff and everything they had to do. It just seems like $1 million is not enough, so I'm just voicing concern.
Okay. All right. Pat, would you like to address that? I know that this may not be, I know that this may not, I know this bid is low from everything I've heard. 42.5 is the low end of what we possibly will get. And so I think that the thought was that if more comes in, we will add it to that, to number 1, correct?
This was probably the most hotly debated topic in the process, which was we heard providers loud and clear that they wanted COVID-19, gap funding or grants, not necessarily specifying the use. And we compared it with other system needs where there's very targeted needs. And at the end of the day, the consensus was we need to be more specific and targeted. And the number that we had kind of come around was 7, 8, or 9 million to meet the provider's needs to include workforce retention. We just erred on the side of more money in workforce retention because it's a more accountable number than grants that is less accountable. But we could not do anything for grants because I believe having that option available provides some immediate help, albeit not excessive help. But also, as we go through the next 3 years, there could be opportunities where situations come up that all of a sudden we need to provide something statewide. We could use that as a tool for statewide needs on more ad hoc needs as they arise, as opposed to providing that money on the front end with less restrictions. So to the provider community, we sweated over it. The same amount of money is being distributed. It's just being more distributed in workforce retention as opposed to grants that have less specific accountability. So I think the same amount of money is out there, it's just allocated a little bit different.
Commissioners, please be reminded to mute your phones if you're not speaking. Thank you. All right. All right. So that does do a little explanation on that issue for us. Is there any other discussion on that issue, or on any other part of the proposal? All right. I'm going to give it one more second. Is there any more questions or discussion regarding the proposal?
This is Pat. I just wanted to say one thing on top of Senator Thomas. We talked earlier, And I would agree, as soon as we finish today and you approve this budget, you know, by the time it goes to CMS and we get approval, it could be 2 or 3 weeks. I believe we need to start today on building written procedures on how we're going to execute this thing so that we have accountability of taxpayer funds, a transparency to everybody, and then work really hard to make it as simple as possible. And so with a little bit of technology, I believe we'll be able to ensure the money goes where it needs to be and get in a combination of both receipts and or certifications that things are being used properly. Because if we lose confidence that it turns into just kind of you know, just excess money into the system, I think that would be a missed opportunity to what we're trying to do.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr.
Madam,
Commissioner Miller, go
yeah,
ahead.
with that, then what we need to do is to get that reporting system in place as soon as possible before we start spending any money.
I think that's a good motion.
Okay, let's hold that motion until we finish this one, and then we can move forward with that. Pat, I do have one question. One of the things that we looked at, and I'm not positive about this, but I want to make sure, is when we looked at option number 1, one of the main reasons we chose that number, if I'm not mistaken, is because we put out there for loans during the switch to fee-for-service on the day program, and then we put out a loan, and no one took that loan, correct? That they needed those gap funds to get them by, correct?
That is correct. We've not issued any loans.
And we offered it to all providers to help them out through the gap, correct?
That's correct.
And none of them took advantage of it.
Not today.
Okay. Well, that's, you know, that tells us right there, in my opinion, that they didn't need it. If they had needed it, we could have given it to them that way, and they chose not to. So that kind of, I mean, I know that number seems low, but if we don't see a need for it, it's kind of, if they needed it, we'd know it because they haven't applied for the loans. Does that make sense?
There are a multitude of reasons why I've heard they have not applied for those loans. That has nothing to do with need. It has a lot to do with not wanting to take on undefined loans, not wanting to take on undefined liabilities. So I would disagree that that's been based solely on a lack of need.
Okay.
During these loans were spent by everybody.
But it's based on the fact that they don't want to pay it. And
I need one at a time. I haven't heard who wants to speak. I need a name.
Barry,
Go ahead.
Stephanie, you're exactly right. That they did not ask for a loan, so they did not need it bad enough to ask for a loan to pay it back. And so it's more about accountability than anything. The reason you want to keep that at $1 million is that's unaccountable. That has no accountability for anything they can use it for. So we wanted to move things to more, as Pat said, to more accountable situations and get funding. I mean, we're doing so much for funding now. It's amazing. So I mean, gap funding is not something we need to put a lot of money into. I mean, it's all about accountability, which this agency does not have enough of, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
I think another way to look at it would be very simply that, and I will speak for the provider network. If I said, I'm gonna give you $1 million of state funds, or I can take that same amount of money and I can use state funds to pay for a new day service rate or a new residential rate where we get Medicaid matching funds, what would you prefer? They would prefer us support higher rates in the long term than $1 million. So we're making tough trade-offs. That's my point. And I think I can just talk, the consensus was more targeted was better than less targeted. And the IDRD waiver match capability, which is just very fortunate it's happening at this time, and we're getting support of HHS with going bold, has really opened the door to really put resources there to really address things from a sustainable perspective. And that's what I heard too in the listening sessions. We want sustainability, and I think we're taking a risk here, putting 3 years of funds and these sustainable rates, but I think the risk is mitigated by HHS's commitment to make these waivers progress. And so I think they'll see the wisdom in that. And some may be disappointed, but it's not like we're taking this money and doing something that is wasteful. I think it's a decision.
Let me verify something. We also were trying to do a match, correct? Maximize the match. Am I correct in saying that? Okay. And is there any further discussion on this matter?
What Pat said is true, of course, except on options 1 and 2, there's no match, so it doesn't affect the match.
That's correct. Okay. Any further discussion? All right, we're going to move forward then. We have a motion on the floor to accept the proposal as written. We have a second. Let's vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All right, all opposed? Is everyone still there?
Yes, they just took down the presentation screens, Stephanie, which is
Okay.
what caused that shift.
I'm sorry, it kind of flashed in front of me. All right, all opposed, please signify by saying nay. Hearing none, the motion carries and the proposal will stand as presented. All right, is there any further business that needs to come before this commission?
One quick, this is David. One just quick observation. I wish Constance and Stephanie as chairwoman that y'all would consider this. When I get notices or somebody asking for an emergency meeting, I think the sky is falling. And I'm wondering if the term emergency meeting should be replaced with, or maybe an alternative to it, which would be expedited meeting, as an example, because we had our backs against the wall in terms of time frame on this particular issue, and we had to do what was called, or that was at the time requested, was an emergency meeting, and that makes it sound like to me, and I suspect people out in the world that see it, well, what goodness, what's crashing at DDSN? I just think the terms, I mean, this wasn't an emergency. This was something that had to be done outside the normal regular meeting. And that's called an expedited issue. It's not an emergency in the sense of, there's no money to pay staff this particular month or whatever. And that's to me, in the minds of most of the public, troops are being sent overseas or whatever. I'm trying to get away from that sensation. I just wish you all would please consider that emergency is not the right terminology. Maybe we should leave emergency in place for certain things that do qualify, but expedited is all it is. We're having to have a meeting on one particular issue that has a time frame, for instance, that you have to deal with. So that's it. It's just an idea to put out, and it's an irritation to me to what's that? You see emergency and you panic. What an emergency? And it's not. It's just, hey, we have to have a meeting outside the normal course to discuss these things. So that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. I have a tendency to agree with that. It is a little bit of an under.
It's unnerving.
It's
unnerving, and it's unneeded to be unnerved over something that is in the regular course of events.
I agree. We'll take that up with the policy committee in the next to get that terminology kind of changed. All right, I do want to inform you all that at the last commission meeting, we had decided to do a special call meeting to interview candidates for our directorship on July 28th. Unfortunately, that date did not work out, and we now have a new date of July 14th, which will be the day before our regular commission meeting. So we will be having a special call meeting that day to begin our process of interviewing candidates for the director's seat. Is there any further business? I know someone had said they wanted to put in place an accounting system. And Commissioner Miller, I believe you and Commissioner Thomas were talking about that, and we had to stop it so that we could vote on this issue? Do y'all still want to bring that motion?
Yes, I can read to you what I have and then we can discuss it.
Okay, go ahead.
No FMAP funds will be approved until the full commission approve the financial reporting system that is in agreement with DDSN auditors.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that. I'll second it.
Is there any discussion on that matter?
When you say DDSN auditors, are you talking about internal audit? What exactly?
Internal.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, let's move forward. All in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the ayes carry. Commissioner Miller's motion will carry. All right, I believe that is all the discussion and meeting information for today. Am I correct, Constance, in that?
Correct.
Okay, then do we have a motion?
To adjourn? Yeah, I
Motion
make a
to
motion to
adjourn?
adjourn.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you all for being here today. We appreciate your time, and it is 11:09 and we are adjourning.